What would life look like if each and every one of us who have roots in Africa returned back home? Or rather, should everyone return to Africa? And I'm talking about folks who trace their history back to the motherland. So, in the next 10 minutes or so, I'm going to try to answer these questions. Hopefully, I'll share something that probably would be of interest to you. Now, think about the potential benefits of those of us who live in diaspora all moving back with the extensive experience and the training and the resources that we have here. I personally think it would be game changing for Africa. And it likely would be a massive, massive loss for many of the countries that have hosted us for all these years. Well, good morning, family. Today, I want to show you around Karating Central Business District. It's a Tuesday and it's market day, so the CBD is going to be relatively busy. Typically, it's not like this. They normally do this on market days, which I believe is Tuesdays and Friday. Now, this part of Karateng is called Nyangande, but the younger folks call it Darajambili, which is right on your way to Maseno in Western Kenya. So this particular CBD you're looking at here is where we typically get our basic groceries, minor hardware stuff, soft drinks, water, meat, things like pharmacy, and many more. And as you can see from the video that I just shot, that it's basically the quintessential village CBD. And whenever I walk around our CBD, I often think about someday being in a position to really change what you're looking at in ways that I'm mostly interested in making this place, first of all, very accessible. As you notice, there are rocks everywhere. And for a person who uses a wheelchair, it'll be probably impossible to move around and get to the shops. You can see how high those stairs are. I honestly don't know how people with disabilities would get services. Oh, by the way, I just ran into this young man who apparently was born and raised in the same place I was raised in the Yugis. And we spent almost nearly 30 minutes just having a very, very intense chat. So he lives in my village now, but he grew up, he was born and raised in the same place I was raised in. So yes, I hope to change at least the accessibility of this area so that people with disabilities can just move around and shop like everybody else. Now, I also hope that I can bring proper lighting, because at night there's lighting, but usually not enough. And especially public bathrooms. I don't know if this CBD has proper free public restrooms. And also, there's a very nice place which is more like the market currently, where they sell groceries and produce. I'm hoping that that place can be turned into a public park and perhaps even build a modern market. So, but that's just me dreaming. I'm just hoping. I don't know where that money would come from, but someday in future, if I make a lot of money, those are some of the things I dream about when I walk around this place that we love. So, well, folks, if you're new to our channel, we talk about everything about returning from diaspora to Africa and just some of the experiences that we've had living and thriving in the village. So I hope this content is exciting enough for you to subscribe, but if not, we'd still be happy to have you as a regular viewer. So back to our topic about whether or not people should return to Africa. Now, first, I want to state that the word diasporans is used to mean many, many things. Initially, I thought it meant black men and women who have left Africa and live outside the continent. But apparently, this definition means so many things. But in my mind, I sort of use it in reference to about 4 different groups. The first group is black women and men who are descendants of human trafficking, what they teach us in school to call slave trade. I don't like using the word trade and slave in the same sentence, because whatever they did in 500 years ago, if anybody did it today, I don't think we would call it trade. It was just plain human trafficking, plain and simple. And so many of these folks who left generations ago through slavery moved to the Arabian world, Americas, Europe, and every other part of the world. And for the most part, the world has built enormous wealth on the backs of these individuals, and yet they are still often treated as third-class citizens. So I'm often one of those people that is a very strong proponent of making sure that we create space to allow people who left through slavery and their descendants to come back and have a place in Africa. The second group that I call diasporans are people who maybe have a recent immigration history, could be first and second generation kids who are born out in the West, or those who are brought to the West as young kids. Some of them are of mixed heritage, have white parents, maybe a white mother or white father. And then there's the second group too, no, the third group, which is now people like us who moved to the West as adults. Some of us have been here for a few years, others have lived here. I know of a friend who's been here for 50 years and has never been home once. And then the last group of folks that I call Africans through love are people who may or may not be black, but have spent significant amounts of time either through church, exchange, tourism, and just absolutely love Africans. And I'm talking about their love for Africans and not their love for Africa. And some of these folks actually have not even been to Africa, but they seem to enjoy everything that we do in Africa. They watch our channels. I've got quite a few folks who've never been to Africa, but just absolutely love watching stuff that we do in Africa. So I call them, quote unquote, Africans through love. So I think all of these people, in my mind, should have the opportunity to have some kind of relationship with the motherland. So just because I am a big proponent of people returning, it doesn't mean that is what everybody should do. I believe that people can do whatever works for them. And so I'm going to break down the kinds of options that I think are there for those who are thinking about the kinds of relationship they should or can have with Africa. Now, the one option that I've seen folks take is what I call a complete return, where those of us who live in diaspora simply resign, sell their property, say goodbye, and then leave and go and live back home permanently. I have not done that. I don't think I'm there yet, but I would love to do that. I think that's an option. I've seen quite a few folks do that successfully, but a few others have done that, but it didn't work out too well. Then the second option, which is what I call hybrid return, is an option that allows people to spend time in both worlds. I've heard of folks who the entire winters they spend in Africa, summers they spend in the West. I think that works too. But people like us, our goal is spend more and more time in Africa with very little time in the West. Typically, that often involves maybe buying a property, building, investing, and progressively increasing time in Africa in spaces like the one you're looking at. So that's hybrid return, where you still have your foot on both worlds. It's just a question of how much time do you spend in Africa. Then option number 3 are folks who return through retirement. And this could either be the complete return or hybrid return, depending on what works for you. And then option number 4 is short-term visits. There are people who may not have the ability to return completely or do the hybrid option. And so they resort to spending a few weeks here and there, maybe every other year in Africa through vacation. Some of them do medical or religious missions. Others come through Fulbright scholarships. And a few others just come for conferences or work, some kind of professional work, bringing them to Africa. I think that is still a very legitimate option. If you don't have the ability to move permanently or do the hybrid, I think just visiting every now and then still works. And then the last option is what I leave up to folks who don't have the ability to return. I know Africans who, given their circumstances, they're probably not going to be able to return. And that's okay. So folks should not feel guilty if they're not able to return. So many of these folks, as I've said, are physically not in Africa or won't be traveling anytime soon, but they're very, very involved. Many of them actually are the ones who support projects at home. One of my friends pays school fees for kids, involved in lots of kinds of charity work. A lot of them actually watch our YouTube channels, which is one of the biggest things they do for us, simply watching and enjoying the content we share. And so there are many, many ways that you could still be involved in things Africa without being physically present. I think that's still a legitimate way to have a relationship with this beautiful place we call home. So in a sense, no single option is ideal for everyone. I think you can pick from any of the 4, or you can still create one that works for you by picking up bits and pieces of the other 4 options that I've shared. So don't feel compelled or guilty if you're not doing what everybody else is doing. Like I've said, returning to Africa is not for everybody else. Pick what works for you. Now, if you want to decide which option is best, here's something to think about. Number 1, at least try and get involved over time, whether it's getting involved virtually or getting involved physically. See if you can make friends, watch videos. But again, also keep in mind that what you see online may be a little bit more sanitized. But get involved and see how that feels. Visit if you can, but also you have to have a good conversation with yourself about your financial circumstances. For one, think about whether or not you can retire in America. Retirement in America is very expensive. And so if, say, for example, your Social Security dollars is about maybe 2,500, that in the village can take you a long way. You would live a very, very comfortable life with that much money. In California, that is nothing. $2,500 a month is absolutely, that's just poverty for the most part. So look at your financial situation. Maybe retirement in Africa may be what you are looking at later on. Also, look at whether you can sustain life in Kenya. Remember, Kenya has a wide spectrum of options. One, you can live a very high-end life, or you can live a very modest life. So you pick where you fall in between. And then, of course, you have to worry about things like emergencies. There are ways to get around them. You just need to have a plan for that. And then, most importantly, I ask folks, every time you are traveling back from Africa, for example, when you're in Nairobi, heading to the airport, leaving Kenya, how does it feel? If consistently you feel terrible or it's not exciting when you leave, then maybe you want to think about finding space to be more involved or be more present in Africa. And then, of course, issues of family. Do you have kids? How old are they? Where are they? What kind of relationships do you have? People with older kids usually have a lot more room to move and be more engaged. So when you have younger kids, even if you physically cannot be present, like I said, there are many ways that you can still be involved in things Africa as you allow your kids to grow and mature. And then on the issue of immigration, a lot of people who have left Africa may have issues with immigration. And this is where I think those of us who are Kenyans have an intense responsibility to make sure that our legal systems make it easy for people of African descent to reestablish their connection with motherland. For example, I don't know how this works, but I'm hoping to have conversations with some of the legislators that I know in my personal network to see if we can actually reform our immigration law so that any black person or any person of African descent who does not have an African passport can become a Kenyan citizen very easily without all the hoops and all the other immigration nonsense that they usually put in place. In fact, I think any black person from anywhere who does not have an African passport should be able to just show up, learn some basic Swahili, connect culturally, and stay home. Because the pathway that led them out of Africa was something that was horrific, something that those of us who are present today were not a part of, but we have the ability to change that. So, as I always say, the world is your oyster. If you're thinking about returning to Africa, you have many, many options. So don't feel guilty when you're not able to return in the same way that some of us are working towards. Well, I hope this was informative enough. And oh, by the way, right now I'm just walking through a tile store trying to identify good tiles that I'm going to use for our gazebo. So I hope this was informative enough, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you very much.